Hello everyone, this is Hochi of the SOTOR Elder Game Podcast. Today I'm here working with Gaddock Teague to bring you this hard mode guide to the Dread Fortress Operations 5th and final boss, Dreadmaster Brontes. So to steal a line directly from Gaddock, let's force leap right in. The first phase will have two different types of adds. First you'll have the left and right hands of Brontes. These have 512,899 HP. Then you have the fingers of Brontes. These have 42,955 HP. DPS and healers should stay in the middle of the room while the tanks face their hands towards the wall away from the raid. DPS should prioritize the fingers. They will spawn in sets of 2 beginning at the start of the fight. They only deal around 3k damage per hit, but if you take too long to kill them, their damage does increase significantly. So you want to down the fingers as soon as possible and then move on to DPS down the hand on your side. At around 80%, the hand will do a 1 second cast, which is a tune, and it'll move to the other side of the room. So because of this, you will want to DPS down the hands evenly so that they attune around the same time. Just have your tanks call out the percentages about every 5%, and one of your ranged DPS can kind of swap between the hands to make sure they go down at the same time. So once they attune, the hands will switch sides. Your DPS do not need to switch sides, nor do the tanks. So if you are on the right side, stay on the right side, and on this next part you'll be DPSing down the left hand that moved over to your side. When the hands switch sides, the tank will have to taunt the hand because it'll still be aggroed to the other tank. So each time there's an attune and a hand pops up, just make sure as a tank that you taunt and face it away from the raid. Shortly after the first attune, your second set of fingers will spawn, so DPS them down quickly once again and then move back to the hand. At around 60%, you will get your second attune and the hands will switch sides again. At this point, if your DPS is fast enough, you should be able to DPS down the hands to 40% and transition to the next phase without a third set of fingers. However, with slower DPS, you may end up with a third set of fingers to deal with. So if this does happen, try to keep one of the hands above 40% until you finish the fingers, then move back to the hand and finish DPSing it down to 40% to move on to the next phase. The second phase is more of a transitional phase. You only have one type of add to worry about during this phase, the Reach of Brontes, which has 4,146,020 HP, but that doesn't really matter because you're not going to be killing it. 2 of these reaches will spawn every few seconds for a total of 4 times. They do spawn randomly on 2 members of the raid, and they'll shoot lightning between each other. So there's no DPS, you simply move away from them and do not stand in between them. The best method here is to stack in the center. This way both reaches will spawn on top of each other, and you simply have to move as a group away from them each time they spawn for a total of 4 times. Another method many raid groups will use is to run frantically around the outside of the room and hope you get lucky. A lot of people do use this method, unfortunately, but it is worse in terms of probability for failure, so I recommend the stack and move method. Once 4 sets of reaches have spawned and finished their lightning, you can start preparing for Brontes to spawn in the middle of the room. Go ahead and have your main tank situated on the north side with your healers and DPS on the south side. This is also a good point to go ahead and precast some flybys in the middle that will hit her as soon as she spawns in the middle. When Dreadmaster Brontes spawns, she has 1,641,705 HP. Your main tank should pick her up facing her to the north. She'll do a 1 second cast called Arcing Assault, followed by a 4 second cast also called Arcing Assault. These abilities will place stacks on the tank, so after the 4 second Arcing Assault, your tank will likely have around 5 to 6 stacks and you'll need to do a tank swap. A corrupted clone of Kefis will spawn at one of 3 locations, west, south, or east. He has 113,975 HP. Kefis will put out nanites on random members of the raid, so this will need to be cleansed as soon as possible. He will do a 4 second cast called Charge, and then he will begin blasting a conal attack at whoever has aggro. Ideally, the off tank should pick up Kefis and face him toward the wall away from the raid. As soon as Kefis goes down, the main tank will likely need a swap, so the timing works out well. If you're having trouble with needing a swap while Kefis is still up, it is possible to have a sentinel tank Kefis. Simply pacify him and use Rebuke, and you should only need minor heals to stay alive. Once Kefis is down, all DPS should be back on Brontes, DPSing her down as quickly as possible. At around 70%, you should get a second Kefis, so the same deal as the first. If you have a Sentinel tanking him, Rebuke will still be off cooldown, so it's a good time to use Saber Ward. Also around this time, near 65% on Brontes, you will start having Energy Spears spawning. These have 25,455 HP, but they do not need to be DPS'd. Whoever they aggro to will have an Energy Beam pointed directly at them. If it looks like it's you, simply target the Energy Spear and check your target-a-target window. If the Energy Spear is targeting you, you'll need to run away from the other members of the raid. Watch its stacks, and when it hits 15, you should be safe to run into it, causing it to blow up and deal damage. The higher the stacks, the less the damage it deals. So you can eat it early if you have proper CDs available. So for example, a Sentinel can use Guarded by the Force and pop it with very low stacks, taking nearly no damage. The latest you can pop it is 19 stacks. If it hits 20 stacks, it will blow up and deal a large amount of AoE damage to the entire raid, which will likely cause you to wipe. These energy spears will continue to spawn until the next phase begins, so it helps to call them out when they spawn and mention who they are targeted to so that everybody stays aware. Unless your DPS is really strong, you'll get a third Kefis before the boss reaches 50%. If this is the case, be sure to hold Brontes above 50% until that third Kefis is killed. Once he's dead, DPS Brontes past 50% to move on to the fourth phase. First, if there are still energy spears up at this point, the tanks can taunt them off and run through them. Be sure to run through them before the taunt wears off because they will return to their original target. At this point, Brontes will start a 60-second cast called Overcharge Beam. This will shoot a beam of lightning at the red door in the north of the room. The beam will move clockwise around the room. Unshielded DO9 droids with 79,806 HP will also spawn at the start of this phase. If that overcharge beam touches any of these droids, your raid will instantly wipe. So it is imperative to DPS these down quickly. It helps if you precast Flyby on the first location in the northeast right as Brontes is pushed into this phase. If you are having trouble with this DPS check, you can also have a Sentinel or Marauder pop Inspiration or Bloodthirst to help, although I do prefer to save that for the following phase. So you'll DPS down the droid in the northeast first, and then move clockwise around the room. So second will be the droid in the southeast, followed by the droid in the south, then the southwest, followed by the northwest, and finally the north. Your tanks can run ahead of the DPS and pick up aggro on the droids around the room so that they don't target DPS or healers. Once you finish the last droid in the north of the room, Brontes cast will stop and the next phase begins. In this fifth phase, your hands of Brontes will return, so the tanks need to return to their sides from the start of the fight and tank their respective hands. Energy spears will also be returning, coming out of the four corners of the room. When the hands do their 4-second cast, called Forceful Slam, the tanks will need to aim the slam at the spears. This will destroy them without causing any damage to the raid. If a spear is not destroyed and goes into the raid, the person targeted will need to run through it like before, but ideally this will never happen. For the tanks, it's easiest to keep the slam facing one corner while you look at the other. This way, if a spear comes out behind you, it's automatically destroyed, and if it comes out of the direction you're looking, you simply move the slam over. This way, you keep the slam faced one way while you watch the other, and you just rinse and repeat. You'll want to be sure to taunt the hands occasionally so that when DPS get to the hands, they don't pull off of you. Also, be sure to stay close to the hand so that your turning radius is small when you have to move it. For the DPS and healers in this phase, there will be 6 fingers of Brontes with 85,487 HP. The DPS return to the same sides they were on in the first phase. The healers will also need to be assigned to the left or right specifically for this phase. There will be 3 fingers on the left and 3 fingers on the right. If you have 2 melee DPS, have them pick up the front fingers on their side. Your healers should pick up the middle finger on their side, and your ranged would then pick up the fingers in the back on their side. The fingers will do a 5-second cast at the start called Focus. You must get into melee range of your finger before this cast ends, and then you must not leave melee range until your finger is dead. Watch out for the Spike of Pain, which places purple circles at your feet. This will deal 10,000 plus damage if you do not move out of it. Just be certain not to move out of melee range while you're moving. If you are not in melee range of your finger, it will place a dot on you or others and do massive damage. This is probably the most difficult phase of the fight, so it's a good time to use defensive cooldowns. If you have gunslingers or snipers, this is the perfect time to use their shields on both sides. For DPS, your ranged in the back should DPS down the melee DPS's finger first so that it dies quickly. Then you both move on to the healer's finger and kill it next, followed by killing the range's finger last, and moving on to DPS down the hand on your side. The hands will need to go down at the same time once again. If you kill one too quickly, then you'll end up with energy spears running rampant through the raid. Once the hands go down, Brontes returns and the energy spears should despawn as you move into the final phase of the fight. As the final phase begins, Dreadmaster Brontes will do a 10-second cast called Supremacy. She is immune to damage during this cast and also regenerates health up to about 61%. Be sure to stay out of the large purple circles that will be constantly spawning under random people. Everyone should move toward the red wall in the north of the room while she's casting. This way, if she targets you and pushes you away, you stay near the group. Tanks should swap taunts each time Brontes targets a DPS or healer so that they keep aggro as much as possible. There will be a stacking, debuff, and dot called Manifest Supremacy. You should DPS down Brontes until everyone has about 8 stacks of this. You can go longer if you need the extra DPS and your healers are able to manage through that extra damage. Once everyone has 8 stacks, DPS the hand down in the northwest of the room. At 5%, the hand will put up a shield and become immune. Everyone should run under this shield because it will clear your Manifest Supremacy stacks. During this, Brontes will do a 10-second cast called Punish Betrayal. You must clear your stacks before this cast ends or it'll be too late. There is no damage going out during this 10 seconds, so it's a good time to group up for AoE heals. Once the cast ends, bring Brontes to the other side near the hand that's in the southeast. Continue to DPS her down until you're back up to about 8 stacks again. Then you can kill the hand in the southeast and clear your debuff just as you did before. Once the Punished Betrayal cast is complete again, return to DPSing down Brontes until she dies. You should be able to kill her before your stacks get too high again, because there's no way to cleanse at this point. So if you find that your DPS is too low or the damage becomes unbearable at higher stacks, you'll need to try waiting until 10 or 12 stacks before you cleanse in the future. Once you've got her down, you've successfully cleared the entire Dread Fortress operation in hard mode. The reward for downing Brontes is 1 unassembled Dreadforged chest piece, a few random Oriconian pieces, and if you're lucky, a volcanic Keldrake. That's it for the Dreadmaster Brontes guide. If you want to get in contact with me, my home on the web is hochishaven.com, where I post the weekly SOTOR Elder Game podcast. And of course, you can find Gaddock Teague at gaddockgaming.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.